Well, good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get this meeting of the Municipal Solid Waste Management and Resource Recovery Advisory Council meeting, October the 11th, 2018, started. I want to welcome everyone that's here, both on the council and in the audience. I'm Holly Holder, the current president, and so at this point, we will start as tradition. We go around the council, and if you would introduce yourself and indicate the position that you're seating. So, Cheryl?
I'm Cheryl Murga with the Houston-Galveston Area Council, and I represent a planning region.
I'm Rosemary Wyman, and I represent the citizenry.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Trebus. I work with Republic Services, and I represent a commercial operations hauling.
Commissioner Wolverton, representing counties under 160,000 population.
Maurice Pitts, Lee County Commissioner, and represent counties of any size.
I'm Risa Weinberger with Risa Weinberger and Associates, and I'm representing the composting industry and educators.
Richard McHale with the City of Austin, representing municipalities and local governments.
Jeff Mayfield, North Texas Municipal Water District, representing public solid waste districts or authorities.
I'm Chuck Rivette with Waste Management, and I represent a professional with experience operating a solid waste disposal facility.
I'm Holly Holder. I'm with Park Hill Smith & Cooper, a consulting firm, and I represent licensed professional engineers operating in the solid waste management industry.
Dave Yankee with New Gen Strategies and Solutions, representing the financial community.
Good morning, Scott Pasternak with Burns & McDonnell, representing the general public.
Good morning, Earl Lott, Director of Waste Permits Division with TCEQ.
Chance Gooden with the Municipal Solid Waste Permit Section, TCEQ.
Allison Owen, TCEQ, MSW Waste Permits.
Diane Barnes, Municipal Solid Waste Permit Section.
Jaspinder Singh, Municipal Solid Waste Waste Permit Section.
Garrett Heathman with the Municipal Solid Waste Permit Section.
Emily Bell with the Business and Program Services Section, TCEQ.
Mark Stewart, TCEQ Waste Permit Section.
Cody Cocaine, MSW Permit Section.
Kimberly Lyle, the Texas Association of Regional Councils.
Sarah Nichols with Keep Texas Beautiful.
Jordan Fingel, Executive Director of State of Texas Alliance for Recycling.
Larry Lang, Texas Disposal Systems.
Crystal Urick with Birch, Becker, and Mormon.
I'm Ben Milford, representing Owens Consulting Group.
TJ Jackson with Boyd Gosling Attorneys at Law.
Alfonso Cifuentes, Green Group Holdings.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming, and I think at this point, Earl, you have the comm.
All right, thank you, Holly. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to provide a little update on what's been going on in Waste Permits Division world. Really, I'm going to focus on the legislative issues. We had another interim committee meeting on September 5th, and it was talking about the solid waste disposal permitting, compliance and enforcement, and all aspects of the municipal solid waste program. And it was a very, very lengthy hearing if any of y'all happen to watch it. So I provided an update on a lot of the issues that we are encountering with our permitting process. Specifically, I focused on a lot of the streamlining efforts that we've undertaken over the last couple of years. You know, one of the things that we constantly get a lot of criticism and feedback on is our notice of deficiency process and the number of opportunities that we give to applicants to address deficiencies during the technical review. And one of the things I really wanted to highlight is all of the work that Chance and his staff have been doing to develop forms and checklists which tell applicants exactly what we're looking for in these applications, and really aimed at reducing the number of deficiencies. And I think one of Chance's staff is going to kind of give an update on the new forms and checklist a little later on. But I do want to put a plug in that we want to encourage the use of those forms and checklists because they really have an intended purpose. The other thing that was talked about is different ways to streamline our permitting process. You know, as part of that process, we are required to coordinate with over 11 outside state and federal agencies. And a lot of times that coordination piece can significantly hold up our permitting process. And one of the things we've done to address that in the past is added special provisions to permit, because I think a lot of times the intent is you receive these type of authorizations or approval from these outside entities prior to construction of the landfill. And we proceeded down that path in certain instances, but we have received some feedback from the commission and others on proceeding without receiving those approvals first. So that's something that's definitely going to be looked at. One of the coordinations that is really getting a lot of attention is the floodplain requirements and the way we look at floodplains. You know, right now we require all applicants to identify whether or not any portion of the facility is located within a 100-year floodplain. And if it is, they're required to coordinate with the local floodplain administrator as well as FEMA and obtain a CLOMR, which is a conditional letter of map revision. And a lot of the feedback we're hearing from local floodplain administrators is there's a second piece to that, in which we're aware of. It's once those improvements that have been committed to in the conditional letter of map revision, once you've received approval for that, not until it's constructed and you get a letter of map revision actually showing that facility is removed from the floodplain is it official. So that's one of the items that was really highlighted, that, you know, our regulations are not closing that loop because we require a CLOMR up front, but then the tail end of the process requires the applicant to demonstrate how they've removed that facility out of the 100-year floodplain. And that issue is starting to come up more and more on whether it's transfer stations, landfills, you name it. So just to name a few, am I missing any other?
No, I think the only thing is the Senate Natural Resource Committee is planning to provide a report on all the hearings that have been happening since session. And so there's not been a date announced yet for that report, but we do expect a report from that committee. If any recommendations are going to be made, those recommendations would be in that report. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. I've been looking to see if there is actually a deadline for all those interim charges committees that are looking at several issues, if there's a deadline for those reports to be submitted, but I don't know of one, but I hope they would have it before session starts. But I don't know, but I'm keeping my eyes peeled for the report. If we do get a copy of the report, I'll have Diane send it out to the committee so they're all aware that the report's been issued. So I'm interested and anxious to see what they have to say. So the session starts January. They start January 8th, so it's
in
upon
pre-fall is in November, actually. So
right. So hopefully we'll start seeing some things soon.
Okay.
You look perplexed, Chuck.
It's a normal look. No, I was pondering the floodplains. I know it's been an issue, and it's one of those circular issues in that truly desire to have all approvals in front, keeping in mind that some approvals, CLOMR being one of them, is not good forever. It has a time frame to it. It's only good for potentially only a couple of years, or until the floodplain administrator does another floodplain analysis and remaps it. So the dilemma developers have, permitting, is do I go through all the effort to get a clomer to put it into the permit process, knowing that my clomer may be expired before I even get through the permit process? Or do I rely on the fact, do you rely on the fact, as the agency, that the prohibitions are very clear and strict in the rules? You can't just go put it out there in the floodplain. You have to have all the approvals. It's not analogous and it's not the same, but you don't require the company to have all the OSHA approvals before they get a permit either, but you expect them to follow the OSHA rules, don't you?
Right.
For safety. And if they don't, a company doesn't follow OSHA laws and rules, you have methods in your field inspection to take care of it, and OSHA has methods. And the same applies to floodplain administrators in counties. If someone, and I guess I'm guessing by the way you said it, there's an issue with people that get clomers, do the changes, and then don't file for a loamer?
The issue is we cannot verify
I see.
whether or not they ever followed up with the loamer.
I see.
You know, our permit condition requires a clomer.
I understand. Okay. All right.
And
well, that's be a relatively easy add-on to just require an update to the
right.
to the file.
Well, and then the other issue that is brought up frequently is the fact that the FEMA maps are somewhat outdated. And a lot of counties and cities are having updated flood, or they call them H&H studies, the hydraulic and hydraulic study of the area.
Yeah.
And, you know, FEMA is just a little delayed in approving these maps. Rightfully so. They've had a lot of emergencies and flood issues to deal with. So.
That's right. That's right.
So I think as we're continuing to see these changing weather patterns, that's going to be an issue that's front and center for us as we proceed.
Yeah, no, I agree very, very much so. Well, let us know if we can help.
We sure will.
Okay.
And we'll probably take you up on that at some point. I'm sure we're going to be looking at our rules as we proceed on.
Well, just a question regarding the loamer process too. If once you get the clomer, part of that says that you're going to develop this landfill footprint. Let's say it is a landfill. And so you apply for your clomer. Did I get the feeling that, well, you're not going to require them to go ahead and build that because no one's going to build anything until the permit is approved. So there you are kind of caught in that circle because they're not going to go and build it until they know they can build it. And only when they do construct it can they then apply for that letter of map revision, the loamer itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious how you guys think you could tie that in at the end.
I'm sure there's going to be some ideas presented. So,
Okay.
Definitely.
Anyway. But we've been busy on this all summer, all summer and into the fall. It's been nonstop on both sides of the legislature. There's been a lot of inquiries and interest in those issues.
Well, like Chuck said, if there's something that we can do to help you guys, reach out to us and we'll see what we can do with our network of people that get involved in this all the time. We'd be happy to help.
Appreciate that. One of the other items I'd like to discuss is the e-manifest requirements. I think those went into effect June 30th of this year, and it requires any receivers receiving hazardous waste or a Class 1 waste are required to upload it into the e-permitting system that EPA developed. And they have a fee associated with that. And if you have a paper manifest that you're uploading, it's $15 per manifest. So that does affect municipal solid waste facilities that are accepting Class 1 waste. And we have received some feedback from a couple of the landfills receiving Class 1 saying that, this federal requirement has an unintended consequences in Texas since we have that Class 1 designation. I think the intent of that rule was to provide EPA and the public with an idea of how much hazardous waste is being generated in Texas and disposed of. since we have the Class 1 designation in Texas and we use that EPA manifest form, then it's required on Class 1 waste as well. And from what we've heard from a few of the landfills is that it's created a significant financial burden for the generators, being the $15 per manifest charge. Plus, if it's a paper manifest, I heard some of the smaller landfills are having to hire a third party to upload them into the system. So that's an additional cost. And the number we heard was it's about a six-figure per year, a six-figure cost on an annual basis to these receivers to upload that system. So I was just curious if y'all had encountered that, or if there was a, that's a significant impact for the industry as a whole. One of the options that we looked at, we have not pursued anything, is it would require a rule change in our RECRA rules 335.10, and basically designate a new manifest form for Class 1 waste only.
Yeah, this is Scott. We've had to hire at least 2 people to go back through manifests when the rule started. One of the things that we've struggled with is how it was kind of thrown out by the EPA. Also, they didn't have initially, the Class 1 codes were not in the EPA system. So when you tried to put like EPA numbers, different other things, it just wasn't there. So that presented a lot of confusion. And I've been working with your office on the industrial side to try to resolve those issues, and we finally came to some resolution on that. So it's working now. It is kind of complicated, and I would vote if we can get another manifest for Class 1. I think that would be the way to go.
Not to disagree with Scott, but I'm going to. We don't, this would have been a great topic 6 months ago, and we did raise it 6 months ago, and we heard nothing but chirping crickets from everybody else in the industry. They weren't interested in tackling it. And now that we have solved all the issues Scott's talking about with the waste codes and everything, there's 3 fees. If you choose to do nothing and you just want to do a paper manifest, and all you have to do with the paper manifest is mail it to the EPA, that's $15. If you take the time and effort to get a password and an entry with the EPA and you enter the data yourself, which takes about 2 minutes, okay, then the fee is $6.50 per manifest. And if the generator does what they need to do on the front end, which to date none of them have, but they will eventually, and go full electronically where it's all just done with tablets, then it's a $3 fee. Again, we spent a fair amount of effort untangling the knots in the system, and I would have loved to have not had to untangle the knots, but having untangled them, the feedback I'm getting is it's just not that big a deal. For the entire state of Texas, for the last quarter, we spent under $10,000 dealing with the Class 1 manifest. Now, $10,000 is a lot of money. Is it enough to go through rule changes, new paperwork? The generators are going to have to do the e-manifest anyhow, because almost every generator of Class 1 generates hazardous waste. And you can't legislate that away. That's an EPA rule, okay? So then you put on them, now they have to have 2 manifest systems, one for Class 1, one for hazardous waste. So we'll just, choose to disagree and say, would have loved to have had this discussion 6 or 8 months ago when we raised it the first time. We didn't have the discussion. As far as we're concerned, it's settled business. Let's move on down the road.
Okay. Well, whichever way we proceed, it would require a rule change, and that's a timely process in itself. So
it is.
Either way it goes, the requirements would be in place until that rule changes. So we're just starting to hear the feedback now. Like I'm starting to get calls, and I haven't received a whole lot of them. I know, Scott, you have been coming in and talking to our RECRA folks on that, and a few months ago. And we've only heard from a few others. There's 19 facilities that are impacted total, so it's not a huge universe there, but it does have an economic impact, I guess.
And again, for a small facility that doesn't take a lot of loads, all they have to do is drop the manifest in the mail, and it's a $15 fee. The state fee currently is $6 a ton, I believe, for Class 1.
Right, tipping fee.
So if you have a 20-ton load or 15-ton load, then you're paying somewhere between, $90 and $120 per load for the TCEQ fee. And to say that you're tacking on a $15 manifest fee on top of that, and that's a backbreaking event, I think is maybe a little stretch.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess the other thing that I would add, and from what I'm being told, is how are we looking at least in the inspections and the enforcement side? Because now you've got all these different methods and how you do it, sending a manifest off. Every time you do a comprehensive inspection, you have 3 years of record keeping you have to show. It's going to get really confusing, and it's going to result into a lot of issues. Or you'll probably be seeing more of us, which you might not want to do.
If you're saying if there's two separate manifests, it would create even more issues?
Yeah, 2 separate manifests, or you sent one off, you don't have a copy, one's electronic, one's not. It's just, we'll see when that happens.
Which is welcome to the tire manifest program in the last 15 years, right? Okay, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank y'all for the feedback on that issue. And then one last thing I'd like to bring up is, and I should have brought my maps, but, we have a listing of all the unauthorized or our tire sites in the state of Texas. And some of those sites are remnants of the tire program that was sunsetted in the late 90s. And some of the sites are unauthorized, illegal dump sites, basically, for tires. And there has been a reduction in the number of tires out there. These tire piles, we were able to successfully clean up this year over 2 million of those tires by negotiating with different entities and working to get them cleaned up. So that number is down to 14 million. One of the things that we're doing to be proactive about this is we're trying to work with EPA. This is working with EPA headquarters to get them to change the definition of non-hazardous secondary materials, because that rule alone is prohibiting us from using tires in one of the most beneficial ways possible. The best use of these unauthorized tires is to use them as fuel for cement kilns. I mean, that's just one of the easiest, most common sense approaches to it. And it also, not only are you using it as a valuable product, you're also eliminating those tire piles, which can be breeding grounds for mosquitoes, and we know all the problems that those create. The problem with that non-hazardous secondary material rule is that a cement kiln that takes tires from a managed program, like tires come from a transporter directly from Discount Tire to a cement kiln, they're in a managed program, they're manifested, they can be burned in that cement kiln all day long. However, if they come from one of these unauthorized tire piles we have, they're subject to what's called the Commercial Industrial Solid Waste Incinerator standards. So the cement kiln itself has to have more stringent emission controls on their stacks and whatnot. And those emission controls are very expensive. It's to the tune of several $1 million. And most of the kilns in Texas are not, do not meet those, what we call CISWE standards. So that creates quite a challenge for us getting those tires cleaned up. But we are working right now, we're trying to put together some good arguments for EPA to consider those tires as managed by the state of Texas. We want to try to bring them into a program so we can then proceed towards trying to get those cleaned up. And like I said, that number is 14 million. It's pretty significant, but next meeting I'll bring the map and show y'all. They're kind of dotted all throughout the state. But I think that would go a long way towards helping the problem if we could get some leeway there.
Oh, it's in their packets.
Oh, it is?
The maps are in
The maps are in there?
in their packets.
Oh, okay.
From the back. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm,
Emily is.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I stole that thunder from Emily, is going to be talking about that shortly. And I apologize. It's just one of those front and center items that's a priority for me as well as the program staff. So she's going to go into it in a little more detail.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes, sir.
We've talked like the last year or two on this issue with these tires from illegal dump sites or what have you. Changing the rules with the EPA has to be challenging, to say the least.
It is.
Is there any way to get like a waiver, go, hey, we need a 12-month or 18-month waiver for specific sites and do it that way?
I tried that approach early on. Now, I guess there is an opportunity to appeal to the regional administrator on a case-by-case basis, like a site-by-site basis, but most of the industry is wanting just a blanket approval because you have to understand, you know, tires, they're really using tires as it's not that much of a benefit to the cement industry. Well, yes, they get some byproducts from the tires itself in the manufacturing of cement, and they get it, it's a potential fuel source, but natural gas is still very cheap in Texas. So, I mean, to use tires, if it's going to create an added burden or subject them to enforcement, it's not worth the risk. And, you know, you have to be very selective when you're accepting these tires. If they can't, like I said, if they come from a managed program, tires off your vehicle and they come through that program, they're fine to be burned as a fuel. But if they come from an illegal dump site out in the middle of a field somewhere, then they are subject to more stringent emission control standards. And those tires burn the exact same way. You can't tell a difference of a tire that comes off of a passenger car versus one that's been in a field. I mean, so it's challenging, but we're trying to work with them. You know, our former general counsel is now the regional administrator at Region 6 in Ann Eitzel, and she's very familiar with this issue, and she's definitely an advocate for Texas, and we're trying to work with her and her staff to provide some justification to EPA headquarters. Because this is this is the federal definition of solid waste that captures it, so it's not just a easy fix there. But I'm glad to see we've got an advocate helping us on this, and I'm pretty optimistic we will find some solutions. But once we get that piece of the puzzle resolved, there's still the issue of funding. We would have to have funding to still go out and load these tires and transport them.
And I guess these sites, these illegal dump sites, there's, you know, is there anyone that owns them that you can go back to, I guess, legally to, or?
It's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah.
The majority of them, I think we pursued them all the way through enforcement, and some of them have ended up with the Attorney General's office, and you kind of name it, it's across the board.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then some of the facilities were once permitted as part of the tire program in the 90s, and once that program went away, then the tires were pretty much just abandoned, but they were authorized facilities. So I hope I didn't steal too much of your thunder, Emily. But that's all I had as far as updates, but I'm available for any questions if you have any.
Okay. Do you want to have any questions for Earl?
I do. Can you declare that there's a public hazard because of the potential for Zika?
You know, we tried that early on to try to provide that justification, but we weren't successful. So I agree. I mean, it is a potential health hazard with Zika and West Nile and all these different mosquito-borne illnesses.
That did help us get that site in San Antonio of 2 million tires cleaned up, though, because that was in the heart of the Zika matter, and that got the attention it needed, and opportunities presented itself for us to get that successfully cleaned up.
I did have a question on the legislative side. Have you heard anything as to whether there's any bills that are potentially in the, like the pre-file category for our industry that are coming up?
I have not, but with the level of interest, I expect to see some bills filed this session.
Okay.
Now, I can tell you that I've been wanting to open these 330 rules for a while now. I think there's a lot of room for improvement that we can make in those rules to help go a long way. So we generally have a policy at the agency where we don't open rules during legislative session just because we don't want to contradict anything that the legislature might do. So my plan is to proceed forward with a rule change request after the legislative session. I will be approaching my management and requesting that we open those rules. So, last time they were touched was 2006, and there's, we learned a lot since that time. There's a lot of room for improvement. As we look at these rules on a day-to-day basis, and there's always a little challenge or nuance to them that we have to figure out. And it's no fault of the people who drafted the rule. You just couldn't think of all those things at that point in time. And a program this dynamic, I think it lends itself to the rules being open on a more frequent basis. So even though, that's kind of a double-edged sword, they're very challenging too. I know the process the last time was, it took quite a while. It was a pretty lengthy process, a lot of stakeholder involvement, and so.
Well, and, the fact is, Earl, and I think that the 2006 effort was a good effort, and the agency shouldn't back away from that. A lot of things come up through the intense cusp and review of the contested case process. Floodplains, you said, are a big issue. Well, we didn't create floodplains in the last 12 months, right? We've been dealing with floodplains. They were in the 1993 rules. They were in the rules before 1993. But it's got a new focus right now because of certain high-profile permit activities, right? And when you go through that intense legal review to the contested case process, then things that don't look to be problematic, all of a sudden you realize that definitions aren't clear or not consistent or whatever the case may be, right? So I think it's important from time to time, and 12 years is a good time as any, it's important from time to time to open them up and say, well, what's happened in the last 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, and how do we make things better? You're not really changing things, are you? You're proposing to make things better and more understandable.
Earl, excuse me. Earl, do you have any interest or appetite in also looking at the 332 rules as well as the 330 rules, either at the same time or in sequence after 330? Not to add more pain to the issue, but just curious.
No, thank you. No, I think all of our rules probably need to be looked at. We will probably have to come up with a priority the way we handle those. We'll probably start with 330 and then move on in sequence to the others. 328 may need looking at as well. So I agree with you. They do need looking at.
330 and 328 together
Right.
are kind of a spider web. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Are you thinking all the subchapters or just certain ones? I'm not pinning you down. I'm just kind of curious.
We talked. These are the exact conversations we've had internally,
in the past,
and we've talked about fixing some of the most significant issues like the agency coordination piece, and that would go a long way to streamline our processes, and we've also talked about, well, let's address everything at once, and it may extend the rulemaking process itself, but we open it one time and try to address it at once. So we haven't really gotten direction on which process we're going to follow. So
I think just to add to that, the spirit of what we've been trying to do over the past 4 or 5 years in streamlining the program, a lot of the stuff that we've done is to help the rule in a sense and get to what we're actually wanting, and without going in and doing some rulemaking, we're at a standstill with what we've got out there for the tools that we're trying to get our stakeholders to use, simply for the sheer fact that you regurgitate the rule into an application. And I find that we don't do that all the way across the agency. There's a lot of acknowledgements in the rule that I quite frankly think we could just say, acknowledge this and move on. But the current practice is we have our stakeholders write all that stuff back into their application, which causes an inconsistent approach. And it's something that could be very well taken care of through rulemaking, saying no longer have to acknowledge all these things, or no longer have to regurgitate these things in your application, but rather acknowledge it, and let's move on and get to the heart of what we need to actually review. Because that's really a boots on the ground type of thing. Is it there? Is it not there? You know, it's not about, did you write it down on this piece of paper that it's there or it's not there?
You know, and I actually testified to something to that effect, you know, that the NOD process is looked at as very negatively. Like, you know, if you have 4 or 5 rounds of notice of deficiency, that demonstrates an applicant's inability to operate a landfill successfully or a transfer station or what have you. And I said, that is not necessarily the case. You know, we look at these applications to ensure that they are protective of human health and the environment. And over 70% of the deficiencies that we identify with an application have to do with clerical and typographical or just inconsistencies in the application. It's not a significant technical flaw with the application, but it's things that need to be clarified. You know, from a regulatory standpoint, it's something that we want to address because we don't want to send an application that's inconsistent to a state office administrative hearing. You know, if you have one part of the application that says the landfill is going to be 248 acres and another part that says it's 234, you know, we want to get that right. It's an inconsistency issue. And as y'all know, these applications are like 6 3-ring binders of information in some cases. So there's a lot of overlap in the application. And a lot of times we're just asking questions to identify where this particular rule provision was addressed in the application. So if we can do stuff to streamline that process and ask for just the core basic information that we need to satisfy our technical review, that's the ultimate goal. And I would personally like to get out of the business of the coordination. You know, our staff are professional engineers and geologists, and I want us to focus on that aspect of the application. Any of the other information, like the traffic, you know, we refer to TxDOT on that, and Federal Aviation Administration, all these other entities, you know, we just need to see some sort of an approval, and maybe we can add my goal would be to add something to the rule that says you shall obtain approval from these entities prior to commencement of construction and set it up that way, which kind of pulls us out of the loop at looking at all these outside requirements. And by outside, I mean outside our area of expertise. You know, we're not traffic engineers or aviation experts or, so.
I understand that, but I do think it's hard if I don't represent citizens, but if I'm a stakeholder and I'm a citizen and I have to go to TxDOT and to all these other places, I mean, one of the things I think the application, it's in all one space. I think it makes it easier to review. I do agree with the parts where you're just, you know, regurgitating knowledge, but I do think we should also think about it from somebody who is not a technical expert, but this does affect their daily life, either their neighbor or something. So I do think that needs to be taken into account too, though.
Okay. And any suggestions there on, I'm just curious.
No, but if I'm a citizen, I mean, I can go look at the permit and I can see the TxDOT. I may not necessarily know. I now have to go, if the change made, now I have to go to TxDOT. I mean, it's placing a burden on somebody who is not the expert. And in the application, now I can go look, I can see the land use, I can see the traffic impact, I can see, you know, I never look at groundwater because I'm not an engineer, but the things that I want to look at. But if I have to go always to TxDOT to all the different agencies, I do think it places a burden on somebody who is not an expert and who wants to look at it for a different view. I mean, if I'm a local elected official, I want to see what it's going to impact my mainline land use, my growth patterns. But if I have to go to all these agencies, it's very cumbersome. And I have other things that I'm doing too. But right now it's in one package, and so it makes it a little bit easier, I think, for a comprehensive review.
Right. And I understand your concern, and I think there's a way we can address that by saying, prior to construction, you will provide this information, and we could put it in the packet, you know, in the permit application itself, as kind of an acknowledgement that it was received. So,
Because concurrently, you know, Margot, it's when we are presented with that information and then public come to our meetings and ask us, we look at each other like, that's TxDOT. We can't speak on their behalf, so we're looking as if we're the reviewer of that and making the decision on that. In fact, it's TxDOT, and so they're frustrated. They're like, well, why isn't TxDOT here? You know, and so that's kind of the dilemma that we're up against, or why isn't the Federal Aviation here? It's a challenge, and so we wanted to be more transparent with the public in that regard, to say, you know, we're coordinating for these agencies.
I understand it's challenging, and I think you guys do a great job. I just wanted to make that comment. I don't have really any options for you right now.
all right. If there's no more questions, I'll pass it on to Chance, and I'll have to apologize in advance for going over. I'm usually about 5 to 10 minutes in my presentation. Today it was 45 minutes, so kind of threw us off schedule.
I think that was great information, and we appreciate you sharing all that. So, Chance?
Yeah, I wanted to just briefly touch base on the annual report that Diane Barnes previously got to you guys before the council meeting today. This is hot off the press. We just got it like this, was it Monday or maybe Friday? So I just wanted to just highlight a few things that are in the report. So on page 12 of the report, we have a new addition to that report. On table 3, there is the landfills that accept Class 1 waste for 2017. That's something new to the report that hasn't been there in the past. And then just other points of interest, you know, the map that we put in there on page 5. We have 196 active landfills for the 2017 annual report. And then the data for that on the capacity and disposal for that is on page 16. On page 7, we have.
Hey,
Oh, y'all don't
Chance,
have it? I'm sorry. I thought
quick
y'all had
question.
the report.
Quick question, Chance. Diane sent out an email that had a lot of the information of landfills in Texas and their capacity, and I guess that's in here as well.
I think that included pending. That was in the pending. The data that she sent to the committee was based on a request from the last committee meeting that can we get the capacity based on pending?
Okay.
So it includes everything plus pending, right? Okay. Then page 7, we have the processor information. We currently have 207 active processors. And then on page 19, I wanted to bring that to attention because we talked about capacity a great deal in the last committee meeting. The COGS, most of the COGS all have, all the COGS have more than 10 years of remaining capacity. But the Central Texas COG, they have right now 13 years of capacity. But if the amendment for Temple Landfill gets issued, then that's going to increase that capacity for that COG. So we all are aware that the reason that number is low is, but we do have something pending for Temple right now. And the report's on the web, as always. It can be found on the web. And we had a 66% reporting rate that came through our electronic system for these reports. And then the 44%, that's what Diane, Allison, and Kathleen chase to get the data that we get in this report. So I thank them very much for chasing those down that don't necessarily get the reports in when they need to. So thank you. So I did have Oh, okay, Diane just gave me a note. Just wanted to put a plug in, but for the 2018 annual report, it's going to be due on November 10th this year, so.
Hey, Chance, I just want to give a compliment. To get this data aggregated, and we use this for clients and for planning and things, and it's really useful, beneficial information, so I appreciate all the hard work. And then Diane, I want to give a shout out for her, because there's times that myself or one of our consultants will call and say, hey, we have questions on this, and she always has an answer.
She does.
So I want to compliment her on that. And everyone.
She is the wheels on the bus. Very much so. She keeps us in line.
I do have a question. I appreciate the compliment. Is the format of the report sufficient? I mean, do y'all like the fact that the maps are in the back, or the information? If y'all have any feedback on that, let me know, because we tweak it a little bit every year. I try not to update it too much. We added the Class 1 list this year because we get questions about that during the year, so I thought that would be helpful. But I just wanted to reach out to see if there's a different format y'all would like to look at.
There's comfort in the familiarity that you have with this, the fact that it is in the same format year after year. And so, and I'll echo what Dave said, this doesn't just sit on a shelf. I don't know how many times a month, I'll reach around where I have it and grab it, and because I'm on the phone with somebody, they're asking a question, I'll pull it up and I'll say, well, here's some information right here. So it is used frequently and very appreciated.
Okay, the next thing I wanted to just kind of touch on is, I'm going to say this every time I see you guys, is our forms and checklists and guidance. So last meeting that we had, I told you about the effective mandatory use of forms and checklists of September 1st. So we're in it, and we are reaching out to those that have submitted after September 1st, if there wasn't that electronic checklist with their submittal, and working with them to get what we need to make sure that we are working in the new process. And I think I'm anxious to see how it's going to work, because I'm pretty positive that we'll see some really good time improvement on processing our applications. So some of the feedback that I'm getting a little bit in the sense of, and we thought about this as well, but trying to get an off-the-shelf type of checklist when it comes to limited scope, it would be quite challenging, because limited scopes are projects that, for one reason or another, are all different. So I hear that, and I'm still standing firm to say, yes, the checklist still needs to be submitted, even if it's a limited scope. And if it doesn't apply, don't fill it out. Just fill out the checklist items that apply to the part of the project that you're doing for your limited scope, so we can make sure that the machine is well oiled. And as we get down the road and we find some numbers that present itself to create a special type of limit scope off-the-shelf checklist, that we could put a box in there and say, if you're changing the gatehouse, or you're changing a fence line or whatever, we can start tailoring those type of items for routine limit scope projects. So capabilities will be there. But that said, I want to go through a presentation that we've done through some associations and with some other stakeholders. We haven't done it for the council yet, on kind of a lot of the groundwork that we've done that's led up to us saying, okay, this is something that we would like for you to do, so we're making it mandatory now. A lot of it's stuff that you've seen on our web pages for quite quite some time, but we just wanted to put some numbers to it and kind of show you some benefits to that. So let me just go ahead and get started with the presentation. And then my staff, Garrett, will come up and do a little demonstration of how the electronic checklist can work for you and your clients, if y'all have any. All right, go ahead and do the, you mean do it or? Okay, so, is it this one? Okay. So basically this, in this presentation, I'm gonna kind of cover some of the forms that we currently have for a type 1 landfill. And it says current technical review process. I guess we could say it is the technical review process now. And then the new technical process is basically now what we're doing. But and then some of the format changes that you'll see in the new format, NODs, and then of course the demonstration. So here's just a list of some of the forms that are available on our website. You know, it says Part 1 form to 2017. Part 1 form has been around longer than the 2017. It's been updated in 2017. And then just some other forms that we've had on our web pages that when you're submitting a type 1 landfill application, we want to see those in there if that was basically for a new application. And then on the right-hand side is some things that we are working on and developing, and hopefully get those available once they've been reviewed. This slide just kind of shows you a cover of what the forms cover in regards to the rules. The number of checklist items that are covered is basically a rule citation, so it kind of gives you an idea of kind of how it's covering all the areas of the application. And the page numbers, I think, is important to look there at what's involved when you use that, because some of those forms, I like the fact that it's just 8 pages, because we could get a volume of information otherwise. So we're trying to streamline our process and make all of our customers have a consistent approach of submitting their applications. This slide shows the number of rules and the percentage in each part of the application. As you can see, the Part 3, we have pretty much about 50% of that covered there. And this slide here shows the number of guidance forms and templates that we currently have available for covering all the rule citations in Chapter 330. You'll see up there the 199, the 22%. Those I don't think it would be conducive to have some form or a checklist for, or a form or a template for, because it's those things that have variability in our rules. You have alternative demonstrations or things that are not essentially off the shelf, and it has a associated modeling, or it's a new thing. And so for us to say that needs to be in this type of format would be very difficult for us to do. So I don't know if we'll ever get there entirely with the entire application being in a form, just because there's at least, I don't know, probably off the top of my head, I want to say at least 11 places to 15 in the rule where it's, you present something to the executive director to approve. You have that availability in the rule to say, or otherwise approved by the ED. If you don't want to do 1, 2, or 3, present something to the ED in number 4, and we'll take a look at it. So the old technical review process, basically we would print up a checklist and start doing our review and filling that out as we read the application to find out where things were in the application and jot notes and stuff. And then that's when we would draft a letter. It goes through the review process and for sign off to go out. And so The new process cuts those three elements out, and we basically now have the applicant fill out this checklist. And when I say fill out the checklist, that means putting the location in which they're addressing that rule in the application in that checklist. That's the key part of it, is making sure that the applicant describes where in that application that a rule is addressed in that checklist. And that's huge, because we'll take that electronic version that y'all created to then do our review, and that's kind of the tool that goes back and forth between the project manager and the person that has put the application together to start understanding if there's something that needs to be added to or missing. And so when we in our old letters, this is kind of what we were seeing when we mailed things to applicants, and it basically went through a whole rigmarole describing where we found what we found and is that what you intended. And so this new checklist format is supposed to eliminate all that verbiage right there, just to get to the point of what we want. And so if you haven't received the new format yet, this is what you'll see. You'll see a little cover letter saying, hey, look at the following table and let us know how you're going to address this. And so we just get cut to the chase, and we say, in this rule citation, you didn't address this, and there was a location for it. And that checklist that you filled out then gets returned back to you to fix. So in a nutshell, to me, it eliminates the variability of how my staff would put together a notice of deficiency. Trying to understand how my staff are wanting what they want, and through levels of review, and then ultimately hoping that the person that receives it on the other end understands what my staff did want. And so we're trying to just succinctly put everybody in the same format to hopefully have a consistent approach of how we write things and communicate with our applicants, and standardize that between my staff and those that we work with. So that's kind of the goal for that electronic checklist. It's supposed to work in concert with the forms that we have out there to help reduce the volume of information that we receive. And I'm excited to see the fruits of it. And we're hoping that we will process these applications and have less confusion amongst staff and those that we serve. So I want to turn it over to Garrett here and allow him to kind of just step you through the checklist that is available online. We're in now version 1.4, and we'll see if y'all have any questions.
Is this on? Nope. Is it on now? Yes. Okay. All right. So, yeah, what I'm going to be doing today is just to go over what we have currently posted on our website for the checklist. So, kind of let me know if this is too small. Nah, it's too small. We'll go in like this. There we go. So this is the first sheet that you'll see whenever you open up the spreadsheet. And this is just an instructions page for applicants, consultants, so on. Down here it explains, what each of the sheets that you'll see down here at the bottom for the instructions, cover sheet, filter, and what we've labeled MRI is actually master rule index. So all these are instructions. Gives a little bit of information as to what some of the columns you're going to see on each of the tabs are. I'll go into that with y'all today. This does contain macros so, which is also known as active content with Microsoft Office products. So for that to work, generally, if you download this from the website and save it on your computer, then everything should work fine. If you have any issues, basically because of settings, we do have links to Microsoft's support page, also our contact information for questions on this, and then just our disclaimer. All of this information here is kind of brought over from our old current checklists that were, or not current, but old checklists that were posted. They just did not have the same abilities that we have here with this newer style. Up here at the top, you're going to notice that there's black text or black with white text, and that's for if anybody's using a screen reader, that this this document can be used that way, and everything has hotkeys, if you will, to activate any of the macros. So it is accessible. So on this second sheet, it's just the cover sheet. This information is the exact same as what was previously included on application checklists. You just fill out all of our information here. There might not be an MSW ID if it's not if it's a new application without a MSW ID, but that's pretty much it here. We do have drop downs for application type if it's a new permit, new registration, permit amendment, and then also right now we are currently using this for new permits, new registrations, and then permit amendments. So you'd have permit registration to pick from. So the new stuff is, previously we used to have 16 different checklists, all in separate files. Sometimes it's a little harder to keep up with. Now we just have it all located in one file, which is this MSW checklist. And from here, we're able to select the type of project that we're going to be working on. So if we're going to do type 1, we click type 1. It kind of does like a filter process. It pops up and tells you that the checklist has been filtered for a type 1 application. So that way, each time if you don't know exactly which one it's filtered for, you can always just go in and re-click it, and it'll pop up and tell you which one you've selected. So this information is, again, very similar if you've used the checklist in the past. What we have is our location, or I'll start at the beginning. So our ID is just a sequential number of which checklist item that is. So that's something that we can easily refer to when talking back and forth with consultants and applicants if we're trying to talk about a certain item. We've also got the application part that's for help in constructing the permit, really, so you know exactly where this information should be included, if it's general, part 1, part 2, 3, and 4. I'm still in this, right? I don't know. So the checklist item, this is either verbatim what the rule says, or can also be what the rule supports, and then also paraphrasing of the rule, just so that we're getting what that is that's required across. So these ones are all general, so they're more what the rule requires for our purpose. As we get further down into part 1, part 2, part 3, those checklist items are going to be more aligned with exactly what's in the rule, because our rules for parts 1 through 4 are already pretty waste related and not a general rule that you'd find in other areas of our 30 Texas Administrative Code. So the citation, this here is used to basically show what's, how it's being required, and if you wanted to look up in the rule to read that area, that would be something that you'd be able to look into. Something we have discussed is making these, like providing links to the rules and these citations, so you'd be able to click the citation and it would take you to the rule online. That would be a little bit of a big project, but it's something that we're looking into. The complete column is not something that anybody actually fills out. Don't think, yeah, it's protected. So the way that that changes from a no to a yes, and we get this question a lot, is whenever you put in, when you put that information in, it changes it from no to yes. So really it's just location information is all that has to be filled out in this situation. The comments tab, the way I see this used is whenever there might be something that needs to have like a little bit more clarification as to if something is included on a project and it's It just kind of differs if there's some variability to that, that item that's submitted. Again, not really for the general, but more, like the Part 3 stuff that we see a lot that might have some questions. Applicants and consultants can definitely use this comments box to fill this out, so that it might prevent us from, making that phone call or that email, or even potentially an NOD letter down the road to try and answer a question that could be very easily answered in the comments, because it may or may not have a place next to that checklist item in the application itself. Something else that we have also is the application area. This was brought over from the old checklists. So you're able to use this over here to filter for application area types. And right now, these we haven't changed these from the older checklists, but we can look at easement and buffer zones, COG review, TxDOT, traffic information, facility impact. As we go further down, we have, and this might be too small for, I don't know if I can zoom in anymore to try and show that.
It's
All right.
pulling off the edge of
Yeah.
the screen.
Sorry. Okay, let's see. No, I don't think, anyway. So you can filter for closure plan, things like that. So this helps during our review, and also I believe during filling this application out. If you have out in the consultant and applicant world, if you have multiple people working on this and filling out information, you might have certain employees for doing certain sections, parts 1 and 4, 2 and 3, and that kind of stuff. So you'd be able to filter in the application area for specific types, and also the application part, so that you're not looking at the whole thing at once. You can just look at like the part that you're supposed to be filling out and that kind of stuff, because I know they are big projects. So that's pretty much.
Okay. Y'all have any questions?
So when you submit that then, and I may remember this from the other meeting, one of the stakeholder meetings I went to, so when there is a comment from you guys, that shows up on the spreadsheet too, right?
Correct.
Further to the right. And then the response to that is also, because the applicant will get a passcode, correct?
Correct, right? Is it the same passcode? No, they don't. The applicant doesn't get a passcode. We have the passcode. Okay.
I thought I heard that we were gonna be responding to that spreadsheet and writing those responses to an NOD right there.
Right, so we have to have a paper copy to be compliant with other regulations. So when we do our review, we didn't have to issue a letter. That letter would come back, so that takes care of that aspect. Doesn't mean that we can't send the electronic version for y'all to then add to address those things electronically. Is that correct? Right. I don't think it's password protected. It's the one that generated that letter that we then can send back to continue the work that was done when you initially sent it. It's like electronic record going back and forth between the applicant and the project manager. Does that make sense? But we still have to send a paper version of that through the mail to make it an official record. Because the electronic version can't act as the official record.
And then what will we post on the website to meet that requirement? Just
The paper version of that.
A PDF of the paper copy?
That paper version will be posted on the URL to be compliant with that. Because the electronic version is a working copy that goes between the person that's putting the application together and the project reviewer.
And maybe I just dreamed. I thought, and maybe that's where I thought this was headed, is that so when there's an NOD, that comment shows up on the spreadsheet, and then when the applicant responds to that comment is also input on that spreadsheet.
So, so what Chance is saying is that right now we will still be sending a cover letter and the table in hard copy format, or in letter format, and what in the letter y'all can request an electronic version, so that when responding to that NOD, you can use the table. It will be a little bit different than what we're showing here right now. This is kind of the first, whenever you're filling it out. What we would send,
It's the file.
yeah, what we would send back to you afterwards would be kind of a little bit unlocked version of the file for you to be able to respond back in that format.
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Well, Holly, you still gotta do the red line strikeout changes. I mean,
Yeah.
the table can have a pretty brief comment that says,
Yeah.
please correct whatever the example you put up there. But that
Exactly.
response
It-
may in fact touch 5 pages.
Well,
in the
in,
permit.
in the likelihood of the checklist being needed on the second round is very small. It depends on what you had up having to do. Like, if you submitted something like, wait, this is a different type of authorization that you're asking for, start over. And so if you redline and strike those things out, and it directly changes the total application of where things go, then yeah, that second checklist would be beneficial to say, where did it go to? But the likelihood of that happening is probably very small. So the second round of that checklist probably wouldn't make much sense or needing electronic version going back, because it's already where it is. You know, we already know where it is. You're just redlining, striking that information out. So,
Yeah, I wasn't saying this would take the place of the red line strikeout. I was just thinking that would produce an overall record of the whole permit
Sure.
application process.
yeah.
And that, you know, some of your comments to an NOD may be, those pages have been corrected. You know, pages 12 through 15 have been revised, and you have to go to the permit or the red line strikeout to see that.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, once you have that permit application completed, you would have on that spreadsheet the entire history of that. And I thought that's where we were headed with this, which, and, you know, maybe that's something down the road.
Yeah, so once we receive the checklist, we do have our side of the review, and so that would keep track of all the administrative review, technical review, and also the first and second round of NODs. And if it went further than that for any reason or whatever, that would also be cataloged in the checklist as well.
Just throw in a plug again, you know, for maybe RFIs instead of NODs, you know, to try to eliminate that
We are
really
aware of the nomenclature.
ugly tag on just asking for a clarification.
All right.
Do you-
Heard.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, noted.
Do you expect on the NOD side that eventually you'll track and kind of mine the data of what your typical comments are? So not necessarily on a permit basis, but maybe type of facility or overarching organization. This many are
Right.
admin versus incomplete, and maybe then we can all learn so that we got to focus more on a particular thing.
Yes, this setup will drive that. Right now, it's just institutional knowledge. You know, people like, I know what it is, but to put it on a piece of paper, this will do that. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm sorry. One quick question. You may have started with this, and I apologize if it's a repeat. How many full amendments, expansions, or whatnot have gone through the process so far?
We did 2 in the pilot,
Uh-huh.
and we have 2 in the hopper, 2 or 3 in the hopper. A couple of them are,
Okay.
one's registration and 2 are landfills, I think,
Perfect.
right now. I think.
And I would say on that one that we submitted, you know, once they got familiar with operating the spreadsheet, I think it flowed fairly well. So once they got used to it, they liked it. New things are always different.
While they're getting set up for the next presentation, I'd like to highlight a couple of things that I forgot to mention in my presentation. I just thought of it as I was looking at the wall. As y'all are probably aware that we received, or Emily Lindley was appointed as the new commissioner by the governor. And Emily was a former special assistant to the deputy executive director, Stephanie Bergeron. And then she had recently moved and taken a role at EPA Region 6. And she was recently appointed commissioner of our agency. And then one of the previous commissioners was Toby Baker. He was selected to become executive director. And if y'all don't know Toby, there's his picture right in front of me, so to the left of the screen there. So anyway. You ready, Emily?
Okay, everybody can hear me okay? Great. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to present at today's Municipal Solid Waste Management and Resource Recovery Advisory Council meeting. Again, as I stated earlier in the opening remarks, my name is Emily Bell, and I am a natural resource specialist with the Business and Program Services section under the Waste Permits Division. And today I will be presenting over the 2017 Scrap Tire Annual Report. So I hope to go over, actually I will go over, the exactly who is responsible for reporting each year to the TCEQ, scrap tire usage in Texas for the year 2017, such as end use and dispositions, data versus the year 2017 and 2016, just to give you a brief update on why there was an increase of tires reported for this year versus last year. And then we'll end the presentation with the scrap tire sites in Texas located across the whole state. So who is responsible for reporting? It is the transporter as well as the storage site and scrap tire facility report to the TCEQ annually, and they must report to us activities from January 1st through December 31st, showing activities such as tires collected, the generator name and final destination if you are a transporter. And if you are a storage site or scrap tire facility, you must report to us the numbers of how many tires you received and or processed. And of course, these are two separate forms. The transporter has its own, as well as a storage site and scrap tire facility share their own, and both these reports are made available on our external webpage for you to download, complete, and submit to the TCEQ annually. As for scrap tire uses in Texas for the year 2017, as you can see, there was quite a bit of jump this year versus last year, and our top one on the list is TDF, also known as tire-derived fuel. This is simply in relation to energy recovery operations, such as like a cement kiln, throwing in whole tires to fuel their operation to power and also create the cement product. Our next one on the list is, of course, a landfill. They are allowed to accept tires as long as they've been cut in half or quartered, but 0 whole tires are allowed to be disposed of underground. As for crumb rubber, we all know that there are these little tiny pellets that are located on football fields as well as soccer fields or any type of artificial turf-related field, and they're used as a shock absorption as well as a cushion in between these artificial blades of grass. For other beneficial use, we can consider this as CrossFit equipment, like those big tires you see people lifting, anywhere from the old tire swing that we used to swing on outside in the back porch. Even there are shooting ranges using these tire tread pieces by cutting off the sidewalls and using them as a backstop. So we consider these as beneficial use projects to where they do not have to register through the TCEQ and receive an authorization or registration number. They simply just have to contact their local authorities and get approval as well as make them aware of certain activities that's happening on site. As for LARPUTs or land reclamation project using tires, this constitutes as reclaiming the land for future use, which constitutes also as using 50% of tires as well as 15% of inert soil material, mixing them and filling them up as in like an old mining operation or gravel pit. And last, we have other recycling. This constitutes as mulch or just basically taking out that wire or steel belt from the tires and sending them over to a scrap metal facility for recycling. And of course, all these numbers were generated from the 159 scrap tire transporter activity reports, as well as the 71 scrap tire facility and scrap tire storage sites annual activity reports that were completed for the year 2017. So why the increase? My section manager wanted me to do some research, and of course, Hurricane Harvey was at the top of the list. It constituted as destroying nearly 500,000 to 1 million vehicles in the state of Texas and more than 500 auto dealerships and local tire generators such as Discount Tire. So the reason why we included this as one of the factors of the increase is because the inside of a tire is not made to get wet. And of course, if there's any type of cracks from dry rot, an old patch job that was conducted from running over a nail, the possibility of that contaminated water going into that tire is very high. And the only way to get rid of those tires is to properly dispose of them, of course, in a landfill, a land reclamation project using tire operations, or sending them off to a scrap tire facility for future recycling and processing. Another factor that we found is, of course, in our tire regulations. Title 30, Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 30, Subchapter F, Rule 328.71, D1 to be exact, it states that one passenger tire is equivalent to 20 pounds. So for those who reported, such as scrap tire facilities or scrap tire storage sites, reported tire pieces in tons, we had to take those amount of tons, convert it into pounds, and divide that by 20 to get an accurate number of how many tires were at such a facility. And then our last one simply is just 2017 versus 2016. Our bigger players, those that come to mind, is Liberty Tire Recycling, TXI Operations, also known as Martin Marietta, or of course Skidden Incorporated, located in Houston. They reported more tires for 2017 versus 2016, and of course we are approving more and more applications each year, whether it being transporters, LARPUTs, of course scrap tire facilities for processing, recycling, energy recovery operations. And we hope to see that there is some type of stability in the future, but again, like Earl said, we are doing more and more scrap tire cleanup sites, such as the Safe Tire Disposal site located in San Antonio, Texas, and we are currently working with those who are trying to clean up the old tire site in Gatesville, Texas. So we might see some more consistency, or we might see a little bit more of a downfall in next year's report. But as for now, these are our three factors on why we had such a big jump from 2016 versus 2017. And then we're going to end off with these scrap tire sites in Texas. There are two main categories when defining a scrap tire site. It's managed and unmanaged. Managed simply meaning that they at one time had a scrap tire registration through the TCEQ and no longer conducting business within the scrap tire management program. So like I said, it could be something from back then and they're considered inactive or canceled today. As for unmanaged, we consider this to be anywhere from illegal dumping sites and unauthorized facilities, and we get this data from contacting all of our OCE representatives within all regions, all TCEQ regions, and then we get a general Excel spreadsheet update on new facilities that might have popped up and constitute more scrap tires, as well as possible illegal dumping sites that were reported to the TCEQ from the public. And we take that data and we create the scrap tire sites in Texas map. As you can see, it is also on this report that you were given in y'all's folders today. But last year, we had approximately 16 million versus this year we have a little less, a little 14.3 million tires. And of course, that constitutes for the scrap tire disposal site that was located in San Antonio, Texas, off of Applewhite Road, that was cleaned up. And I believe it was mid-April that the project was completed. So this map constitutes for April 2018, and as you can see, we have a lot of tires throughout the state of Texas, but we're hoping that there is more and more improvements each year as this program goes on, and that's all I have for you today.
Emily, just real
Yes.
quick, so the 16 million tires, that was 2016 number?
Correct.
Okay.
And I apologize, make you repeat. You said the 2017 to 43.7 million was a big increase. What was the 2016 number?
I believe it was 34.4, so there was approximately 9 million tire increase.
All right, and we can account for 4 million of those from hurricane damage.
Right.
Approximately.
Right. And then we constitute the other ones from simply approving more and more scrap tire facilities as well as transporters. And of course, landfills are not required to report to us for the scrap tire program as well as LARPUTs. So we get that data from going back into the transporter annual activity reports.
Right.
And that's how we figure out how many tires were sent off for those in-use or disposition locations.
Do you guess that we really, other than the storm, we really didn't generate more than 4 or 5 million tires from the storm? We just maybe counted better now?
We did constitute, we were wondering whether or not, whether to use the 20-pound conversion or the 22.5, because we go back to that cost estimate for financial assurance.
Right.
And it states that 1 tire is equivalent to 22.5, but then whenever going back into our regulations, it does state that we want to count 1 passenger tire equivalent to 20 pounds. So that also made that big jump. Simply,
there's another rule inconsistency for you. Write that
Yeah.
down. Okay, put that on your list.
Yeah, because simply whenever we went back, we generated, okay, if this was to be 1 tire is 22.5, and then we did 1 tire to be 20, we subtracted that difference, and there was approximately another 4 million tire difference just from doing a different conversion factor.
I'm old enough that I was around when we still had a tire program where there was the reimbursement and all that. That whole issue about passenger tires, how do you factor in truck tires? Because those weigh a lot more.
Right, and of course, we try to stay as consistent as possible, and we're not given, like, this is a truck tire, this is a passenger tire. We're just given weight in tons, that's it. As for those facilities who only accept whole tires, we have more of an idea, but again, we don't constitute weight. We're just counting the number of tires at each facility that is either stored or processed and just in-use material.
Okay. Because if you're just going with total pounds, that's accurate. If you're counting tires that are generated, it's probably something less.
Right.
Because that was actually a huge issue on a dispute over reimbursement 20 years ago we got involved in, and tire counts and reimbursement. And so it's just, you don't have that program anymore. You don't have to worry about that, but
Right.
it's just interesting. Thanks.
So what you're really talking about is passenger tire equivalents.
Correct, that's
So
what we take.
maybe that's what we need to be referring to as passenger tire equivalents.
Right, whenever it comes to the weight in tons, correct.
Good
And of
point.
course, we contacted all of our scrap tire facilities who reported their weight in tons just to confirm that there wasn't a mistake, that they converted in pounds, and they all confirmed that the number that they recorded was in fact in tons.
I think your report's getting tighter and tighter. I would offer a suggestion to steal from Diane's
Yeah, sure.
report.
Okay,
She has these little tables where she gives historical data,
okay.
and I don't know if you could fit one of those little bitty ones in, and I don't know that you care to go back too far, because I think the data is suspect once you start getting back, but maybe, a couple of years, and then you can build on it as
So
you're
you want to show
confident.
like 2015, 2016, 2017?
Just a thought, just some kind of historical trend.
Okay.
As a reference.
All right, thank you. Is there any more questions?
I was just curious on, Earl was mentioning about the kilns, and I don't know if you've ever laid on a map where the locations of these are in Texas, just to see how they correlate to where all the tires are. You already done that?
Yes, we've done this. We have 8 energy recovery sites approved throughout the state of Texas. I know that there's a Nucor steel operation that doesn't technically, they don't produce cement, but they use tire-derived fuel. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions for Emily? Well,
Well,
thank you
Just,
very much.
just a comment, Emily, I don't think she's been with us quite a year, but we got her in here to manage this tire program, and she's done a bang-up job. That's part of the reason for our success in getting some of these cleaned up, and as y'all can see, she's got a grasp on what's going on, so
Absolutely.
kudos to her.
job.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, that leads us to our next item on the agenda, which kind of goes back to our July meeting where we had a lengthy discussion of recycling and the impacts of of China and the sword policy. And so we had kind of left this open, talking with Chance and Diane again about continuing that discussion and seeing if it wants to drive itself to a point where we might make a resolution issued by the council to pass up to the commissioners to get prepared as they're working on their agendas for the upcoming legislative year to include a topic like that. Is that kind of ring what we were talking about? Okay. So really, we had reached out to several of the people that had spoke at the last meeting and invited them to come back. And I know we have one here, Jordan Fingal, and he's actually, I think, with Texas Municipal League meeting this week in Fort Worth. And so he's got a resolution I think he's trying to get passed. And you're welcome to come up, Jordan, and at least kind of give us an update of where you guys are and what y'all are doing.
Thank you. Hope you guys are doing all right this morning. Cool presentation on the tires. Great stuff. Good data. So yes, it's been interesting since July. I'm very happy to give you guys a quick update. And again, Jordan Fingal, State of Texas Alliance for Recycling. And we actually have the whole ED family here from STAR, which is even more amazing, I believe. Quick thing real quick. So I just want to, we like to, this is kind of a general presentation we've been given. First thing we'd like to start off with is the Texas Solid Waste Act of 1989. Ann Richards really presented a very robust and comprehensive plan back in 1989 that really focused on solid waste being a state policy and a state concern, that provided funding for the promotion of development of markets, statewide education, technical assistance, and job training, and also through the founding or the funds of the general fund GR 5000. Also established a 40% goal of diversion by 1994. I'm just kind of giving you a basis of why we're doing the legislative push. So the first thing in 1989, again, it said to like do some studies and look at the generations and all that. In 2015, there was a private-led measurement effort at what recycling was doing in Texas, and that was initiated through the TRDI. That study was founded in 2014 through STAR in Texwana, about $80,000. We had a lot of different haulers, manufacturers, and MRFs involved. We took those results to the 2017 legislature and had House Bill 2763 passed, and that was around a $250,000 effort, which led to the report of the study on the economic impacts of recycling in Texas. That study shows that we're about a 23% recycling rate, 9 million tons recycled, 17,000 jobs, $3.3 billion in economic activity, $195 million in taxes paid back to the state and local governments. Three things that really kind of stuck out in that report: lack of markets, quality, contamination, and need for some education statewide. In March 2018, which I gave an update back in July to you guys about, there was a kind of a market crash from China, essentially shutting the doors on accepting recycling. They've been doing recycling across the globe for about 25 years, absorbing over 170 million tons of plastic, which is nearly over 70% of the global percentage of plastic produced. And so the market crash really is affecting us because we are one of the only one actually out of 34 OECD countries that does not have a overarching recycling policy. So that's something that's to be noted on the federal level. Also on the state and federal level, we don't have any kind of subsidies that exist for recycling at all. And while if you look at the other virgin extraction industries, they are actually, they have enormous subsidies given to them. So that is a hindrance in our market as far as using recycled materials as a feedstock. The loss of the value to the foreign markets is definitely occurring across the board. We've seen, like it's noted there, about an 80% drop in market value of most commodities. There are still some commodities, PET, which is a #1 plastic, like your water bottle, your HDPE, which is like your detergent bottle. Those are doing well. Cardboard is low, but is actually doing pretty good. Cartons are doing well, and metal is doing good. So there are still some goods. The quality standards, we still have not seen anyone reach that 0.5% for the contamination rate that they're asking for bales to be sent over to China. We've seen about as low as 2%, but not a 0.5% range. So we're still having some efforts trying to work on cleaning up that contamination and getting those bales out to China to meet their standards. But that sword that they enacted in March of this year is effectively seen as an embargo. I mean, we really can't do anything with our recycling, and to add insult to injury, which I'll go into further here, there's a tariff that was just placed August 23rd upon recycling. A big note here is 65% of the materials that we see in the single stream carts now have a negative market value. Mainly because what's in our carts is mixed paper, mixed plastics. This is something to just take note on. After the announcement from China that they were going to stop their imports of all these recycling, we looked to Southeast Asia to be kind of the silver bullet, so to say, the proverbial silver bullet. But that, and you notice, look at Malaysia. I mean, 63 million pounds of plastic were sent over there in May, and it started kind of declining because as they realized that China shut their doors, they became the world's dumping ground. And that's very problematic. So in July, after I left here on the 12th, on the 18th, China announced plans to actually implement their complete ban of recycling earlier than 2020. It's something very serious to take note about, because we only have a mere 2 years that we thought to try to develop these end markets, not only here in Texas and nationally, but globally, to be able to manage these materials that we continue to produce as a consumptive society. July 23rd, Malaysia implemented a 3-month ban on all plastics, which was still obviously in effect until October 23rd. Vietnam announced no new licenses for waste imports on the 25th. Malaysia revoked all import licenses for 114 processors on August 2nd. On August 8th, China announced the 25% tariff on recycling coming into their country. So not only do we have a contamination standard that we cannot meet, but now to ship stuff over there, it's 25% more cost. August 13th, Taiwan announced that they were going to ban the mixed paper and greatly reduce their scrap plastic imports. August 16th, Thailand announced a complete ban on scrap plastics within 2 years, so another 2020 timeframe. And within 6 months, none of the e-scrap will be accepted in Thailand. And then 27th of September, which was fairly recently, Malaysia enacted on top of their revocation of the processing license, but an additional tax of around $3.65 per ton on those plastics. And again, going back to that, if you look at 52 million tons being sent over there, that's quite a heavy burden, additional tax on people that are shipping stuff over to get processed. So how is this affecting Texas? Well, in June, as I gave a little synopsis of what it was doing, DFW announced that they're going to pay nearly $500,000 for recycling this year. It's projected to be about $1.7 million next year. They made $1 million last year off of recycling, so big change. In July of this year, Kilgore is going to raise rates due to a $20,000 processing cost increase by Republic Services. Oak Ridge agreed to a rate increase from Waste Management in July. Also, 4 areas in Houston in a mud district are going to lose recycling due to the recycling costs rising of processing. And earlier this month, San Angelo is now looking at various service options in response to increasing processing costs. So we're seeing negative effects, but out of all of this negativity, we actually at STAR and the STAR Business Council see a very bright opportunity for development of domestic end markets and infrastructure. And so another point is to make it that recycling is not going to go away, and nor are plastics. I mean, we can do single-use plastic bans all we want, we can stop straws, we can do all these things, but it's not going to go away. We've made 8 billion tons of plastic since 1950. It's projected to be 34 billion pounds by 2050. Again, it's not going to go away because virgin materials are knowing we're a little bit low on having virgin materials being found. So scarcity and increased cost, recycling helps mitigate the price volatility in supplies. There's a global population that's growing. Plastics obviously are very important in our supply chain because they make food last longer. And there's all sorts of transportation and different benefits that are seen through the use of plastic materials. And so again, that's not going to go away, but we just need to be a little bit more responsible for how it's managed as a packaging material. People like to recycle. It's a feel-good effort. Recycling creates jobs, as like I said, 17,000 jobs in Texas alone. And there's a public aversion to landfill development, the NIMBY syndrome, which has been around for a long time. So we created kind of a battle cry. It's very generic, but it fits well. It's recyclables are resources in Texas generated by Texans, used to create jobs in Texas for Texans to create products for the world. A lot of Texas in there. But it means, Texas is a very proud state, and so we've made identified that call. What we're doing this year is we created, when I came here in July, we talked about a recycling market development board. That was kind of an early notion that we've since stepped back from because it's probably better to identify and get a plan, and then from that plan, maybe that's prescriptive to have a board developed or something else. So what we did is we kind of reworked with our stakeholders and developed some legislation that will afford the state, or we're charging the state to fund an in-market development plan, which will identify and plan for the gaps in between the supply and demand of recyclables, identify the barriers and plan around them, plan for opportunities to strengthen the existing and developing manufacturing capacity in Texas, and make more broad and aggressive development in the manufacturing capacity as well for plastics and for paper and anything that we basically generate here at the state. The assumptive cost right now is around a $500,000 tag that we're looking at for this plan. This is not a study, so it's something we want to make very clear. This is a prescriptive plan that is going to show and tell how things will be done, again, how to support our industry here, but not only that, but to grow it. The second part of this is an educational or awareness and promotion campaign about recycling. At the top, again, we need to emphasize to the general public that this is an economic activity. This is a value to Texas. There is environmentalism behind it. And like I always like to say, I'm from California, it's the fruit, nuts, and flakes granola state, but that doesn't sit well everywhere, and especially in here in Texas. Environmentalism is a hard one to reach for. So what we can reach for is economics. Everyone can agree that creating jobs, saving tax dollars, creating local and regional revenues is good things. So that's what we want to do, is educate people about that economic value, and that's why it's important to actually participate in recycling. There's the necessity of quality. So wish cycling needs to end, but how do we stop people from wish cycling? Throwing literally right now about 1 every 4 items are going in the cart that are not supposed to be in that cart. So how do we do that? It's going to be to make people think about their actions and make about the education about the products and what needs to be accepted and put into those carts correct, and the impact of the contamination. It's going to save tax dollars if we can help mitigate the contamination. Not only that, but we want people to recycle, but we want it to do it right. And the cost is about plus or minus $1 million is what we're looking at for the initial ask. Cost estimates for this educational thing statewide, we went as high as $5 million. But let's start somewhere that can get an effective foot in the door and start teaching people about why we're doing what we're doing. And then not only that, but let's also plan to help stabilize and then grow the industry. We have some major backing for this, and that's what I think is going to resonate the loudest down at the Pink Dome. And that's why we have solely sought after the endorsement of businesses that are involved in recycling in Texas and beyond. This is everyone from cart manufacturers to equipment vendors to processing companies to educators like the Recycling Partnership, who's actively helping out the city of Garland and El Paso right now. Duracell manufacturers, obviously, hitting the mic. Processors, FCC in Houston and Dallas, composters, haulers. We have the general gamut, again, of businesses that are basically calling out to the state that this is important, this is a viable industry, and we need your support. More endorsers, Closed Loop Fund, Avantgarde, Liberty Tire, the Green Building Council. The list goes on. We have major backing from major companies. And not only that, but we have a huge win in that we secured the sponsorship and promotion of this effort through Ameripen. If anyone doesn't know what Ameripen is, the American Packaging Institute. So this is the conglomerate of corporations as far as ExxonMobil, Kellogg's, McDonald's, Colgate, Procter & Gamble, Nestle, Pepsi. So these are major companies that looked at our draft bill, looked at our effort, and said, we agree. Texas needs some end markets because we produce these materials on a daily basis. We're sending these things overseas, which is inequitable and is, in my opinion, ludicrous, because we should be doing domestic processing and infrastructure. I would like to point out, though, that our bill is nothing about flow control. We are not going to implement anyone or require anyone to, if there are domestic markets built in Texas and infrastructure placed, people can choose freely to still export outside of Texas into America. They can still use foreign processors. We are not going to require people to stay and use this Texas-based system. But what it'll be equitable for them to use that development. Today, like Holly said, we have representatives up at the Texas Municipal League meeting in Fort Worth. We got the resolution passed through the city of Pflugerville, so they sponsored this and pushed through a resolution on the city level. We're up there hoping that the TML will accept this as part of their legislative agenda as well. Tex Swana, we are presenting at the board meeting coming up next week. The NWRA, we were just down there a couple weeks ago and presented down there, which is the National Waste and Recycling Association, major haulers. We almost have their backing. We're going through some talks about our draft bill with them. And then we just received the backing of the National Recycling Coalition and the Steel Recycling Institute last week. So we are making some strong headway, and we are very excited about this effort that we're pushing. And again, it goes back to something, we're not developing anything that's really new. We're just calling on the state to act upon the 1989 laws that already exist and to further our industry and help support it and grow it. So with that, any questions?
Thank you, Jordan. With the TML, so they're trying to get this on their legislative agenda? That's
correct.
And so you haven't heard yet if that's been approved?
No, that's today. Yeah, the meeting. I'm not sure when that vote goes across, but they're hearing all of the city passed or fed up resolutions, and all the representatives and officials are going over them, and then they'll actually do their vote today. So we will know by today, or at least tonight, if they have adopted it as part of their effort.
Okay.
Which I think that's going to be a good thing. Again, we've focused on this business case because Texas is very pro-business, and we're not trying to mix the environmental message with the economic message. So if it comes down to legislators and the governor that this is a sole business case, all about economics, I think that's where it's going to win on this. And that's why the TML thing is good, because we also need the municipalities. If you look, cities are having to deal with rate increases or different processing fees. So if we can get them involved and develop these markets, we can also actually help municipalities at the same time, as well as the business case. I know I talk fast, I'm sorry. You can throw stuff at me next time.
And we talked a lot in July about the electronics recycling, and you didn't really address any of that in your current program.
Because and honestly, that is something that we still don't really have a good answer for, honestly. If you look at it, Malaysia was the biggest importer of this stuff, and they said no more within 6 months. So the answer is the processors that I know are paying to have their plastics recycled as far as electronic scrap. So it's not, whereas before last year they were able to make a revenue off it, right now it's a loss. But in order to keep their business, their certifications, they have to recycle. So they're losing money right now on their investment and on their business. But there are companies right now like Geotech Polymers up in Ohio. I was just connected them with a couple of electronics recyclers, and they need this material. They're having people from China come over actually to Ohio and pay cash, because since we can't get the scrap over there so they can process it into pellets, we now have some plastic processors in America that are making the pellets, and they're coming over and paying cash for this stuff because the demand is still there. The infrastructure is still there to make these products. Like, a lot of stuff is still made in China. So they need those plastics and they need that paper, but they're just not getting it over there to get pelletized. So we need that here in Texas.
I just want to compliment you since you were here last, and I know I've talked with Steve Shannon on this, and you guys have been talking to a lot of different folks, but you're making a lot of headway. And the one thing I would say is there's a big awareness of, China and the challenges, but I think if we can have more discussion about end markets, who's doing what, because there are things happening in the U.S., but, for municipalities, Scott's firm deals with it, we deal with it, and you guys hear stories, but everybody's going, the value's down and we don't know what to do with it. But if we get the word out, there are markets being developed and businesses looking for the material, and it's just getting a better connection with those. And I think this is a great idea.
Right. Yeah. And we're from talking with Geotech Polymers, they're looking at co-locating. So we're getting the municipal solid waste study as well as our economic impact study. We have quantifiable data that now we can provide to these companies and say, this is the material that we know is in Texas. It's being generated. We know that we can do a better job at recycling, that 10% of bottles are being collected, statewide. So we were missing about 90%. So we have means and ways to get an increase of product to people, but there's people right now existing, Carbon Light in Dallas, that's a bottle-to-bottle manufacturer. They have to bring plastic into Texas because they can't get enough. So it's multifaceted, but if we can start putting some more boots on the ground as far as infrastructure to eat up this material, I think we're going to be better poised as far as an active state and someone to show the nation that we don't need to rely on foreign markets. We can create jobs here, save tax dollars, and create basically a circular economy in Texas. The products that we use here will stay here to make products that we use, and it just keeps in a very tight circle, which is the best economics if you look at supply chains.
So we had a TARC meeting recently in both HJC and North Texas for our next FY19 and going into 20. our big focus is contamination. For HJC, it's the rural counties, and North Texas is a little bit more of that. But, you know, I understand there's a possibility of cutting the COG portion down by 17% and the tipping fee, which, you know, if the COGS partner with STAR, which we have in the past, that reduction actually is gonna make it even harder to fund any education programs. Does the TCQ have any stance on the possible reduction to the COG tipping fee? Or have you heard any of the discussions? Was that?
As far as increasing?
No, decreasing it, the COG split. You know, it was 50-50, now it's been reduced, and I understand that at the State Natural Senate meeting, or whatever it's called, it was considered dropping it to 17%.
Okay, yeah, that was a properly appropriations hearing, so, well, you know, and I don't know if the focus was on cutting the COG funding specifically, but, you know, when we look at our fund balance, it's a constantly declining balance in our Fund 549. So I think there was a projection at some years in the future, if we don't address that, the program is going to run out of funding.
I'd be fired by my COG colleagues if I don't talk about it, but I do think it would be something that HJC would support, is maybe this board looking at a resolution not to support the reduced funding to the COGs, because it affects our local governments.
And the education programs, yeah, you're correct. I mean, we would, that's why it is up to, it. You know, part of it is the COG responsibility in getting that initiated out there as far as education and awareness to the citizens, but that's also part of this ask, is that we take a more proactive state level on in-market development and as well as the awareness. So yes, the funds need to still go to the COGs. They still need to play their part in dispersing this information and helping the infrastructure to grow on the ground. But we also need a bigger umbrella from the state as far as making sure that we can educate people, and that goes down to the COG funding and everything else. So I think it's time for Texas to shine, and this is a perfect opportunity.
Anyone have any questions? Jordan, Scott?
Just to follow on to what Cheryl mentioned about the work ongoing in North Central Texas COG region, that's a project that Burns and Mack is assisting the Council of Governments there on. And as Cheryl said, the focus is to help them develop a education and outreach campaign that can be implemented on a regional basis. That's focused on two main things. One is to decrease contamination, and then the second aspect is to increase recycling. And so even though and we're working with the recycling partnership on that effort as well. So even though that's being done directly for communities there in North Central Texas, our general idea, our expectation is that whatever campaign is going to be developed can hopefully be used by anybody else in Texas. And so hopefully there'll be ideas from that, you know, whether the initiative that you're working on, regardless of that, whether that goes forward, a lot of the work that's being done right now in North Central Texas can serve as a foundation for other things here in Texas.
Yeah, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, if it already rolls, let's keep rolling with it. And we're happy to also announce that Representative Ed Thompson out of Pearland was able to advance our draft bill to the Legislative Committee last week. And so I spoke with Senator Zaffarini actually yesterday in Laredo when I was there, and I was like, hey, I would like to talk to you about our effort. And she's like, I already know about it. I've heard it's making news down there. And so we are making some good headway with this, and it's very supportive again because it's a pure business case and it's economics to advance this state. And that's, again, it's a shining opportunity for Texas to lead by example for the recycling industry in America.
Why am I only hearing this here? The last meeting was the first time I'd ever heard that there was an issue in the recycling industry.
Correct. So in 2013 is when they first really did the green fence, and that only was a 10-month issue. And we kind of reeled from it a little bit in the recycling industry, but things went back to normal because China still needed that material and they still were accepting it. And the problem is once a processor accepts a contaminated bale, that's it. The domino effect starts. And so everyone can accept a contaminated bale. That's why China shut the door in March of 2018. That's why it's such a new thing.
Yeah, what I was trying to get at was, why isn't it in the news?
It is. It's ABC actually did a huge coverage of it. NBC has also done it. It's slow. It's not the top, But it's, I mean, it has made some national USA Today and different outlets have definitely picked up the recycling in China woes. It's not your front page stuff, but or maybe second page.
Has anybody estimated any increase in landfill costs to municipalities or anything that, how it's gonna start affecting citizens on a local level so that that push could be?
And that's something that, yeah, it would definitely help. And that's kind of our talking point is right now with rate increases coming from processing, because it's costing so much to try to get that 0.5%. It doesn't mean to allow it to stay dirty, because we can process trash in recycling in America, but we do have better processing capability. So we can handle a little bit more contamination in our materials here because we have sorting and optical and everything else. But we do need to clean it up, and we do need to provide the processors with clean materials. It's I guess it's not really been mentioned as far as how that can be a very effective as far as the municipalities in mitigating those rates. But there's a direct correlation, because if we can process stuff here, the municipalities aren't going to have to pay a higher processing cost because of those 0.5 contamination rates. So it kind of goes hand in hand. And that's why we're going with TML, because we need the backing of these cities to really say that, you know, this is important because these rates are going up, and we're ending recycling programs. We know of 10 states in America right now that are landfilling recycling. So that's just, you know, there's a lot of more states that aren't, but there's programs ending across. You look at Sacramento, they stopped their curbside recycling. St. Louis is kind of jockeying what they're going to do with things, and those are major cities. So that's a call, in my opinion, if you have one of the leading regulation and advanced states of California and their capital city stopping recycling. That's an alarm in my opinion, but it's interesting.
Yeah, Holly, if I can respond to Heather's question a little bit, in that we've been working with 3 cities across Texas recently with their recycling processing contracts. And so it's definitely the case that the cost of processing is going up. And with each of those communities, though, they've all unequivocally have said, our residents, you know, love our recycling program. They want that to continue. And so what we've advised them is that you just need to do a more effective job from a financial planning perspective, and to be prepared that this, whereas in the past you may have received revenue from this program, and you might in the future, because these are commodities driven by markets, so markets change, but it's really important to budget to look at these as a potential cost year in and year out. And so I'm not going to say that that's going to work with every city, but so far with 3 recent cities in different areas of the state, that's really how they've approached it.
Yeah. I know San Angelo just had a meeting on the 4th, I believe, and that was one of the options. Do they just quit recycling for the term until the markets kind of come back up, or do they continue it and just add a service charge increase to the customer? So it's being debated, and the general consensus from the comments at the city council meeting was people really liked recycling and they didn't want to see it go away. So that's something we pointed out as far as recycling is not going to go away, because we've spent 30 years, if you think about it, since 1989, or 88 is, the Marlboro Barge 4000, and 89 was Huntington Beach streamside or single stream recycling with the first program. So we've spent a lot of time and effort and money in making recycling a social kind of program, and we don't want to see that be negated just because of one foreign processor that we've relied on for 25 years. So again, this is the time for Texas to shine. And there are a lot of companies here. So we have Ball Jar, we have Owens Illinois Corning, we have the Carbon Light, we have Evergreen, we have Smurfit Kappa. We have people that consume these materials, but we just need a lot. We need more on the ground, and we need to do more kind of a hub and spoke and identify these areas of opportunity and how to connect these dots.
Jordan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
As long as we're on topic, if there's anyone in the audience that has something that pertains to this, I'd open the invitation to you to come up and speak on it right now. If not, I guess I would ask the council if there's anything else that we'd like to do. We discussed, is there a resolution that we could pass, that we could push up to the commissioners? I'm really not sure, hearing all this and the fact that they're already working with TML, what we could do on that regards, except piggyback on something that Jordan's already worked on. Does anyone have any thoughts on that as to how helpful is that to the commissioners? I mean, do they pass a legislative agenda that they pass up? Is it to,
Well, no, we don't provide legislative recommendations.
well, I was talking about
but-
if we passed it up to the commissioners, is that they don't operate in the way where they would give a legislative agenda to?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
No.
That
I think
answered
it's
my
just
question.
a resolution to the commissioners.
Yeah.
That you support it.
Well, if anyone care to do that, or do we want to just kind of pass on that for now? You- Well, you looked at me. I thought you were going to say something. If not, don't push the button.
Well, you know, just as a policy matter, I think it would certainly be appropriate for this body to express support for the initiative that STAR has begun and is teaming with TML and others to try to support markets for recycling in general here to support development of a circular economy, move toward a more circular economy. I don't know whether our resolution is going to actually result in anything other than a symbolic show of support, but if anybody ought to be supporting this, it ought to be this group as far as I'm concerned. So,
I would agree, Risa, and I think, you know, maybe that's really what we need to do is just, you know, do we need to take a vote to offer support to STAR, and just, you could put us on your next presentation that the MISRAC supports you as well.
I'd like to make a resolution that this body, I'm not sure exactly how to word this properly, but that this body support the efforts that STAR and their business council have begun. Just a statement of support, a resolution of a statement of support.
We have a second on that.
Second.
Does anyone have any other discussion on that? I don't call the vote to accept the resolution as mentioned by Risa. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Resolution passes, so. Commend you on your efforts, Jordan. Good luck.
Just to say thank you, so you guys also, Ms. Rack had supported or previously supported our TRDI effort. Speaking on mic, I was just gonna say real quick, so. I appreciate the continued support from this group. The TRDI initiative that we did back in 2014, Maya did in 2014, was also supported through resolution by Ms. Rack. So I definitely appreciate continuing that support, and we look forward to working with the state and developing these end markets.
Thank you, Jordan. Okay, last items on the agenda, just some housekeeping items. First, you have in your packet the minutes from the July 12th, 2018 meeting. If you've had a chance, I'll give you a brief minute, and if someone wants to make a motion for approval of those.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Maurice Pitts and a second by Jim Wolverton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We've got dates, tentative dates for the 2019 meetings. You can see on there, January 10th, 2019, April the 11th, July the 11th, and October the 10th. I think I've already programmed those in my calendar just to be safe. If there are no comments or concerns, we would just go ahead and accept those, Diane.
That work for everyone? Last year I sent out appointment emails.
Mhm.
Do you want me to try that again this
Yeah,
year?
that
Would
worked. Mhm.
That work? We'll
That
give that a
works.
shot. Okay. As soon as I get them booked, the last time I checked, they were still all open. So if there's a conflict, I'll let you know about that. Otherwise, I'll book them, and then once I have them booked, I'll send y'all a email
Thank you.
appointment.
Next item, action items. Do we have any action items? I don't have any. And then final, we will open the door one more time for any public comments. If you have any questions, concerns, or just comments you'd like to make to the council, this is your opportunity. May come up to the podium. No comments, then we will take motion to adjourn. Our next meeting will be here on January the 10th, 2019. We're adjourned. Thank you.